Hi, and welcome to VFX Tutors. I'm Josh, and in this tutorial we're going to be continuing with building our chainsword. So in the previous one we finished off creating our motor and sprocket. So now in this one we're just going to create the sort of bracket so we can mount it to the motor and then mount the motor to the blade. We can sort of figure out how we're going to sort of, we're going to figure out the logistics of putting this all together. So from the start, I've kind of imagined that we've found some bits of kit, found, like, let's say we've got parts from an electric skateboard, a broken katana, some bits of chainsaw, and we're just putting it all together. So I'm just going to keep with that sort of theme. So I'm just going to bring in the reference image for my bracket. So I'm going to go to my orthographic front. Going to select my camera and image plane and import. So now I'm just going to import in my reference images. So it's in here somewhere. So we've got loads of reference images in here now. And we should find a bracket in here somewhere. So we can see how it's kind of mounted here, and we can probably assume that we found something of the same. There we go. So we're going to make something like this. Obviously it's not going to be as clean as this, but this here sort of gives us some sort of challenging shapes to make. So I'll just open this, and I can just hide the rest of this. I don't need this now. So just looking at this, we can sort of see the challenges that we're going to come across. So let me just sort my mic out, sorry. So we've got lots of holes, lots of curved holes, sort of like kidney bean shapes and all this sort of stuff going on around here. So this is not exactly, the image is, it's got a perspective, so when we're sort of modeling to a perspective with something that's got perspective, we can just pick one side, then mirror it across. So first of all, I'm just going to map out these holes, because the holes are going to be the thing that's going to pretty much determine how much edging that's going on in here and how much geometry. So I'm just going to lock this now so I can't move it. I'm going to create a cylinder. Just going to rotate it 9 degrees. Turn my X-ray on so I can see. And that's pretty close already. And I'm just going to scale this up. I'm going to use this as my sort of... I'm going to use this hole as my sort of anchor point for everything. Obviously the perspective's off, but if we follow this top edge, it still follows around fairly correct. So I'm going to use this as my reference. So we've got to build these holes. We don't have to build these, we can duplicate these round, but let's just see how we get on with that first. So you want to make sure that you've got, when you create something that's going to be sort of mirrored, you want to make sure that you have a the correct sort of amount of subdivision axis. So I've got 20, so I've got, so if I deselect that, turn my shading, you probably already know this because I do this every time. So I make sure that if you look at this, I've got 20 sides, so 20 subdivision axes, and that means that I've got an edge that goes downwards and an edge that goes left to right, so I can mirror this perfectly. Because all I want to worry about is this top part. So at the moment I am going to just keep that there. I'll use it as my reference. Control D and duplicate that. Then select my original, because my original will have this the polycylinder history shape on it. So now I can reduce that if I wanted to. So I'm just going to scale this down. I'm going to try and get that roughly the... It's quite close to the edge here. we've got a nice little bevel going on there as well. So I like to map out everything with the cylinders first. So I want to make sure everything's round, because when you it really does make a difference when you subdivide it, because you can spot it a mile away if it's not quite perfectly round and stuff like that. So I've got 18 there, so I could actually... So if I bring this down to possibly a 12, I can see that I can still use my symmetry here, and it's quite tight around here. But don't forget, every time we do something like this, we've got to make sure that I say it a lot, but sort of like edge accountability. So because we've got 20 edges on this one, and what do we say on this? We've got 12. We've got to try and find homes for these edges. So these edges got to match up around here. Not necessarily at this point in time. We're just using this as our reference for this shape. But we've got to sort of make sure that whatever we sort of create these holes, we have to make sure that it all matches. So I think I'm just going to stick with a 12-sided shape on this. Because if I duplicate this, I just roughly place it. And what I'm doing when I'm rotating it, I'm just rotating it so I have this edge that goes cleanly through the middle. I can do it on that one. So when I do join these, I can sort of match them up quite nicely. So it's probably safe to assume that these are pretty much all the same. They look the same. I imagine they're machined exactly the same. So we'll just do one of these, then we can duplicate this round. And then once we've duplicated it, we can figure out the geometry here. Then we can mirror it. And that will also determine how many sides that we want on this. So we can leave that. I'm going to keep with the 12-sided. I'm going to Control D and duplicate that. I'm just going to scale this down. Just going to remove that little rotation, so that's now square. Control D and duplicate that. And even though that's, so if I pull that just in one axis, it kind of looks wonky, but I'm going to make sure I keep it straight. So if I can't get it exactly, it's because we're at a perspective, it doesn't matter so much, I don't think. And this, let's just, if we Control D and duplicate that, I imagine that's exactly the same, and it is. So we don't need to do that twice. If I Control D, bring this up to here. It's all about being efficient with your modeling as well. So if you can duplicate some mesh, it will save you so much time. So in reality, we only have to model this bit. We can duplicate it around. And same with this. So if Control D, I'm just gonna use this as reference. So I want to make sure, because I'm using this as my center point, I'm gonna hold V and snap in the Y. Oh, sorry, this is actually, yeah, no, that is the Y. I want that to be square with that. So even though it's not bang on square, it's probably because that we can't actually get the center. So for now, actually, I can put that there. Then once I've modeled around it, I can adjust that. So I'm actually going to leave this now, and I'm going to start creating these holes. So I'm going to select the faces, I'm going to delete all the inside edges. And delete all those edges there. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Then I'm going to do the same for here. Delete those edges. Make sure that I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Cool, so I'm just going to go to my perspective. Press F to center. Obviously we've got some sort of crazy, they're not all the right sort of depth, so let's not worry about that for now. We can fix that once we start extruding. So I'm going to select these two. I'm going to go to my modeling, mesh, combine. Then I can actually tear off a copy here actually. Just put this down here for now. Then I can go back to my orthographic front. So what I want to do is select my edges. Go to my modeling toolkit and bridge. And how many divisions do I put there? Let's put 2 divisions because that's going to help us with the edging. Press G. And we can keep 1 division on that because there's already quite a lot of geometry and there's less distance in this one. So I'm just going to select, first of all, I'm just going to select these edges and I'm going to make sure my tool is reset to the world. Actually, I'm going to select both these edges so they're uniformly translated. Just going to sort of roughly get those in. So I press 3. We can sort of see we've got this rough kidney bean shape. Pull this down slightly. This one up. Maybe we I think that should be all right. Cool. So let's select all these edges, press Ctrl E. And what I always like to do is just make sure that I've got my first initial extrusion, which then I'll not go any deeper into. I will not like sort of add poles or nodes in there. We haven't got very much space here, so we need to make sure that this is nice and clean. So probably now what I can do, select all these faces, and I'm just going to delete them. Then I'm going to go to my object mode and mesh display in reverse, just so everything's facing the correct way. And they should have something like this. And I'm going to select that edge and I'm going to bevel it. And I do want some more geometry in there. It's not really enjoying how that's looking. Press 3. Make sure that we just do it in the X. So I'm just gonna sort of roughly match this up. And because we're in quite a weird perspective here. We look kind of straight on, but we're actually not. So I want to try and figure out how we can make this work as symmetrical as possible. So I probably know that this is not going to be enough edges on here, so I'm actually going to straight away double this to 40. So at least now I've got a symmetrical amount with a good amount of edges there. And I'm just going to go to my shading, change my X-ray. And I'm just going to use, I've roughly centered it. Now I'm just going to, in fact, I want to get at least pretty close. I'm ignoring everything underneath. I just want to match at least as close as I can to this top sort of curve. So I'm just doing this stuff roughly around here, and obviously there's a bevel there that we see, but ignore all this down here. We're gonna mirror that. As long as we got this sort of distance here sort of correct or close as we can. Don't worry too much, because we're not, the way we're seeing it through an orthographic, but this is shot perspective, so this is going to have some sort of perspective warping on it for sure. So we're not going to get it. We can't straight off mimic this by tracing over it, otherwise it's going to look weird. You can see that we'll squash it. So we just have to sort of get these shapes and mimic a perfect symmetrical shape, and this is how I'm going to do it. So now I've got that sort of rough edge. I'm now going to select my faces. I'm just going to Control E. I'm going to extrude it out until it matches this top one. I'm not bothered about the rest. I'm just going to focus on getting this top one as best as I can. And these are going to be my guides. So this is nothing more than a guide at the moment. And we can sort of see, so if I insert and change my pivot point to the center of this, and I'm just going to rotate this around, and it probably won't fit at all. And you can see it's a completely different shape. So we now need to figure out how we're going to make, because of these are all the same, but because the perspective, they're going to look a little bit weird. So this is just one of the other challenging things that you're going to come across. What's the best way to do this? So I am actually going to make another cylinder. In fact, no, I don't need to. I can Control D and use this cylinder here. And this is probably what we should have done at the start, so apologies for that. I'm just going to scale this up till no, I will make another cylinder because I need those edges here. Oh, let's make sure that's 90 degrees. And I'm just going to match this as close as I can, making sure that these edges are close as possible. Cool. So I think something like that. So we've got this touching this edge because we're matching this distance here, and we're matching this sort of curvature here. So now we'll need to make sure that my polycylinder's not massive, or at least we've got something that's easy to work with. Did we have a 12-sided one before? Sorry. Let's go with 16. And I'm just going to rotate this round until this edge aligns here, because we're going to use these to sort of match everything up. And this is going to be, like I say, this is mostly our guides. So I'm going to press Insert, snap that to the center of this cylinder. Control D. See, I'm just going to rotate this around until it matches that thickness there. And what we're doing here is we're making sure that we're constantly keeping this depth, because if we just modeled around there, we can see we'd be modeling way too much thickness. So I find this is the easiest way. So I always, like with everything, it's just blocking out first. I find if you block it out first, it makes your modeling life so much easier. So if I actually duplicated those and roll them around. We need to make sure that it stays within the symmetry. So this is the tricky part. So I don't know if these are all the same size, but we can probably assume that they are. So these need to be the right size, which they're definitely not at the moment to be symmetrical. So if I actually scale, so if I scale these down. How do I want to do this? I want to make sure that these are all working symmetrically, basically. And you can see we've gone off our symmetry line. So if I go back to my symmetry line, we can see how much there's overlap. It could possibly be that these are smaller, so I could just rotate this round. Just blocking everything out of these cylinders. We can even Control D, duplicate those and see if those fit around there. So I think these are just slightly smaller in the reference, because that's working now, I find. So we actually need to make sure that we do that evenly. So I'm going to undo that. I'm going to select these and Control G and group them. Center pivot, press insert. It's easier to keep track of the rotations now. So I'm going to Control D. And I'm going to match the rotation on the top. Let's go 60 degrees. Oh no. 60 degrees is a little bit too much. I don't know, maybe 60 degrees. And each of these could be easily minus 16 and 16. Oh no. So 7.5. So I'm just going to select this group and a Control D. And hopefully if I do minus 60, it should fit nicely in there. And obviously this is going to be, if I just hide this so we don't see that. So these are not the same distance. So what we've got to figure out is why that's. Let's get this at the same distance. We might just have to do it by eye if it's not quite working perfectly. So I know these are exactly the same, which is good. It's just why these aren't. Maybe this already had a rotation on it. It could just be that this thing is not machined properly. It might be machined offset. I don't know. But I think if we had it not perfect, it would look a bit strange. So I'm actually just going to rotate these around just so they look like they're the same. And for the sake of just measuring it, I'm just going to bring in a cube, because I could just snap these edges, but they're not with the measure tool, but those vertices are not exactly the same. So 0.1 is really small. I'm just going to use this cube as a measurement. So I'm just using geometry as a reference. So I'm just going to just rotate that ever so slightly. Cool. So they're pretty much the exact same width, even though when we look at it, it's kind of not, but let's not worry too much about that. So I'm just going to rotate these around so they work better with the geometry we have. So these top ones, actually, if I now select all these, just center the pivots on them. I kind of want to now orientate these so these are going to work with what I want. So I want to line these up a bit nicer. Because these are going to be the basis of what we create. So we have got some discrepancy there. It's alright, we'll figure it out. Anyway, so we've now got our cylinders perfectly mapped out. And because they are slightly different, what I'm just going to do is going to select all the faces first. I'm just going to start joining them together. So I'm going to delete those. Then you want to make sure that you delete, only leave 6 edges. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Oh, sorry, but it's not 7. It's, you make sure you delete the equal amount of edges. Sorry, faces. So I'm just going to select both of these. And I'm just going to go modeling, mesh, combine. Now if I go to my perspective, I can see it here. I'll just select my face. So the second thing that I want to do before I actually do this is because I can figure out how many edges that I want. So you get, again, using this center cylinder. Just going to select my faces, and I can Control E and extrude again. It's probably safe to say that it's going to be, and you can sort of see how not round this is. And this has to be round because our motor's round, so we can see there's definitely some sort of perspective going on with the whatever lens has been used. So we don't have to have exactly the same amount of edges on the outside. I've got a feeling we'll probably need more. So we can do that once we've done this. The main thing is we just want to select these edges and bridge. Add an extra division in there. Do we want one extra, or let's see what this looks like if we just add one and just match that edge. Like I said, we'll probably, let's actually add 2 divisions, just so it's keeping it nice and equal. You probably don't need to, but it's nice to. I'm just going to add a division there and just add 1 division, so it's a nice even shape. So the first thing that I want to do is I'm just going to go around and tidy up this geometry, even though it's not matching there. I want it to be symmetrical, so I'm going to get this inner, just going to snap these inner ones to here. Probably do the inner 3, I think. Then once I've done those inner ones, I can figure out where we're going to go next. So I'm going to select these edges and Control E, just do my first base extrusion on it. Now we can see where we might want to go with this sort of curved edge. So I'm just going to select these and very gently push them out. And we'll match this to another reference cylinder a little bit later, just so it doesn't look strange. Cool, so we've sort of done one. We can now, before we go any further, let's just delete those extruded faces. And we go to mesh display and reverse. Now let's do the same for these ones. So I'm going to select all the faces, can delete them, and just delete these sort of. We can delete. Well, you can delete as many as you want. You can delete right to the edge or not. We're going to be joining them anyway, so it's entirely up to you. So now I'm just going to go to my object mode, select them both, mesh, combine, then go to my edges, and bridge the edges. And I can see in here that I probably want to add another subdivision. And the same at the bottom, just going to bridge, just add one subdivision. So I'm just going to go through and just tidy up these edges. And we'll do that a bit cleaner with, so we can actually snap these to these, because we know that these are following the round edge. So the closer we can keep this to the actual roundness, the nicer it's going to be. I think that should be okay. Now I'm just going to do the same again with this edge. I'm going to Control E, extrude it out and do my first base extrusion. Now I can go to my polygons, delete those backwards ones, those back faces, sorry, those ones we just don't need, and reverse my normals so I can see them the correct way. Now we're just going to do the same to this last one here. And we'll, let's say once we've done all of these, we'll create a large cylinder so we can match the curve, because I imagine these are still sort of round. Cool. So select these two, go mesh, combine, and the same again. Let's just bridge these edges. Ooh, only bridge the edges there. And you only want to bridge it if it's an equal amount, so we've got an equal here, so you don't need to add any subdivisions. And we can bridge here. And we'll go with 2 subdivisions there. So I'm just going to select these vertices now and just snap them to that inner part. Because at the moment we're sort of following the reference, but we're trying to keep it as symmetrical as possible. And we can probably we can roughly sort of smooth this out. But we need to make sure that we're very careful, because we can end up adding lumps into it. Cool, so I'm going to add another cylinder I'm going to select that. And then select the cylinder I've just selected. I'm going to go to my rigging, constrain, point, orient. So now it's in the exact same place. I can delete these. And all I'm going to do is just going to scale this up. And I probably want this to match the circumference of, at least the, not the circumference, the sort of curve of this. So this is probably going to need a lot more polygons, because we need to sort of match it as well. So we just go straight on with 80. Let's try that. So I'm just going to match the distance, not necessarily the curvature. I just want to match the distance. Because if we start using the image to match our sort of curvature, that means it's when it's going to start look very odd, because we're at a different perspective. So I feel something like this. Let's bring it down a little bit. So, because I've always been matching to the top section, so it makes sense for me to now continue matching to the top. And you can see that we're way off on some of these bits. So now I'm just going to select my vertices and sort of, I'm just going to bring them down. Try to, I'm not snapping them to it, because I want to kind of keep the distance that they already have. I want to make sure it matches this curve. It can be quite tricky. You want to try and keep them nicely spaced. Obviously these are not probably evenly spaced. So let's go to this one here. You can see how far off we are. We may have to change the actual curves of these, but so I do want to make sure that I've got a nice roll off on each of these. This is where it just becomes a bit tricky, where we've got round edges and perspective. This may look a bit strange because I'm not following it, but it will sort of make sense in the end. So we've got all those. Let's hide that. And let's do the same again for our. Let's just double check that we've got enough edges for what we want. Let's just hide that. So I'm actually going to select all these. In fact, I haven't done my initial extrusion on that one, so I'm just going to Control E. Just extrude that out slightly. Then select. That's why I prefer using the modeling toolkit, because sometimes it just doesn't select what you want and it's annoying. So I'm just going to go to mesh display and reverse. Cool. So now I'm just going to take the smooth off these. I'm actually just going to combine these. And I want to sort of figure out how many edges that I'm going to have. So it's pretty... In fact, let's just do this one. Let's join these together. I think if we bridge this, one there, one there. So if we look at this, we've got our polys accounted for here. So this would join to here. So it's looking good there. Got some horrible mismatch geometry here. I don't know how that's... It's not a problem. We can just slightly adjust it. Might look a little bit ugly though, that's the only problem. So let's bridge that. It's definitely looking a little bit. So let's just tidy this up. It's looking a bit horrible here. So if that goes to that, so how many edges have we got on the inside? So let's start marrying these edges up just so we can get a good idea of what's gonna happen. And before I actually do that, I need to select these edges first. And just do one extrusion out from it. And I'm just going to extrude it out so it's roughly about there. Now we're going to snap these to these parts on the inside. I just want to, so I'm just doing this so I can just sort of check out how my geometry is going to evenly be spread. Because there's nothing worse than when you do all this and it's sort of, you end up with geometry that doesn't match to what you want, and then you're left with a massive sort of rerouting your topology. But I know I go on about the topology of this quite a lot. It's, at the end of the day, it's hard to surface, so the only reason you really want to make sure it's looking really nice is if you're going to be applying for a modeling reel and you need to show off your topology, which it's crucial that you show off decent topology. Definitely added it up with something very odd here. How's that happened? we snap this down here. That snaps there. Obviously we can't. Well, let's see how that looks. If it doesn't cause creasing, it should be fine. So obviously, we can address that if we need to be, but other than that, it's such a small issue, it should be fine. It's just all of this up here is looking really nasty, so let's try and smooth this out. I know it's probably going to change the actual roundness of the ends, but it's not a huge amount we're changing. Cool. And it just looks a little bit nicer. We can worry about that later. Cool, so what we have now is we need to figure out where our outer edge is going to extrude to. So I'm just going to select all these outer edges and probably actually not those. No, I will do that actually. Control E. I'm just going to extrude that out, and I'm just going to extrude it out that much. Nothing crazy. Where's that cylinder that we used earlier? So now I'm just going to select, use this as my guide again. I'm going to select all these outer edges and Control E. I'm just going to extrude this out, matching the top again. So I've done everything to the top, and you can see, like, if we modeled this straight on, like straight, if we just traced over this, we can clearly see that we would have had something really odd going on. So this is why you kind of want to treat things as halves, and mirror it, then worry, like, you have to do a little bit by eye as well. But let's pull that back actually so we can see it. Cool, so now all I'm going to do, we've got our center line here. So we do need to figure out what we're going to do here as well. So it's another thing on the list. But first of all, we need to sort of get this all working nicely. So it doesn't actually particularly matter if... Oh, it does actually, so ignore that. So do we have too many now or not enough? Anyway, alright. So I'm just now going to pull these out. To the edge of the geo. Because we've got it all fairly fairly evenly spaced as it is, so we just want to make sure that our outer edges is at least at some point touching these edges. And we can snap it to the geometry, but it's kind of not matching up how we'd want. But let's just make sure that we've got even edges, and we can just push this out. And I'm sure after I've finished modeling this, there's probably figure out a much more efficient way to do this. It's purely just because I'm just doing this as I'm going. I've not, and I've said that a couple of times, I've not prepped any of this, so you're seeing it. This is exactly how I'd probably attempt it if I was modeling it. So you're getting exactly what I'd just do, basically. I'm not sure if that's... Cool. So we're right at our duplication line. So I'm just going to select these edges and Control E, drop that down. Just going to target world. Oh, so I can target world there. It's not going to let me do it. Maybe I can snap it. And I could just merge those afterwards. So I'm just going to snap all these edges to that mirror line. And I'm just going to go around and just double check all these edges are nice and evenly spaced. Cool. So now we've hit the sort of point where it's actually flattened out. So I will select this edge here. That's it. This is only a for reference, so I'm just going to extrude that out. And you can see how it's not straight, but we can live with, we're extruding it out straight, so don't worry about that. So let's now go to our modeling toolkit. And let's start matching this up. And obviously, once we've got it pretty straight, we can just scale it. So I'm just going to Control E. So we've got something that I don't particularly want on the corner. We've got a pong there, so I will add another, I'll probably add another tiny extrusion to the edge before I add any thickness. Cool. So let's continue this out. We can just go edit mesh and merge to center. And you can see that we're going to start losing quite a bit of our mesh here. So let's extrude this out. Control E, just extrude that out. Just hold those and go merge the center. Let's fix the sort of symmetry here as well. And what did we do? We did 3, didn't we? So we could probably just actually bring that one there. Merge center. I'm just going to extrude these three down. Just going to scale it. Hold B and snap it. So it's not doing it because it's probably right in the way of something. I'm just going to Control E and bring that out there. Select those two and merge the center. So now I've got this nice. I've sort of made this sure that this is perfectly round and this is now flat. If you do want to just double check it, you can just scale that part. So now hopefully this should give us some nice shapes. So now our next thing that we want to do, we kind of want to figure out all these parts. So I'm just going to bring this up to here now. So if I just Control E. I'm just going to use my merge the center. Sort of rearrange this. So I'm quite happy with that, and now I'm just going to figure out these holes and marry all this up together. So I'm just going to hide my reference cylinders now, so I can see this a little bit clearer. And I'm now going to work on these. So same as usual, I'm just going to select these faces. Luckily these are pretty much symmetrical, so this is a much easier shape to do. I'm going to select both of them. Mesh combine. If I just press F in my perspective, I can just select my edges and bridge. I could probably stick maybe 2 divisions in there just to be safe. Just press G to repeat command and do the same there. So now if I double click on the edge loop and press Control E, I can do my first extrusion around the edge. So now I select my faces, select the edge loop, and I can delete that. Now I'm just going to reverse my display. So I'm going to center my pivot, I'm going to delete all my history and center it. I'm going to make sure that I'm aligned to my actual geo. So now I'm going to do this one, this hole. I'm going to select my faces. This is the easiest one. So I'm just Control out and add that edge. I'm just going to go to my edges and delete them all. And delete those ones back there, so they're all. I'm just going to do the same again. Freeze it, delete your transforms, and delete history. Hold V and snap it so it's the same size. Then I expect this is exactly the same as that, so I'm just going to Control D. And I'm just going to roughly place it so it's evenly spaced. So what I can do, I can just turn my grid on. It's quite a small grid, so it's not going to be much help. But if I mesh combine these two, I can see I've actually got it pretty much in the center, so that's cool. So now what I want to do is, once I've done that, I actually want to figure out this outside shape. So now I'm going to do the same with this, but delete those, delete that edge. And this is a little bit trickier because I need to sort of figure it out from the depth. And I don't want to sort of go because it's going to be quite difficult to get it correct. So I'm just tracing around it with my edge as best as I can. Because this is going to be straight, because you're going to have to kind of guesstimate where you think it's straight. And I'm not going to try and model around this. I'm just going to block it out roughly. Then I'm going to subdivide it in the middle. Because I also need to figure out these edges got to marry up as well. So just sort of making sure my extrusions are matching something along here. This is definitely at the top, so if I hold V and snap to there, I can see actually how it's just way off, right? So I now need to go around and roughly adjust it. Cut in there. I'm just going to try and get this curve matching with a few more edges. I'm just trying to keep it all in the center. And I'm kind of matching it, but not matching it. It's a mix of trying to keep it equal and match it. So it's a very odd thing to sort of do. Because obviously I know I've got this shape. So I need to create at least with it so it's level here. Not sure if that made any sense at all, but if you've ever tried to trace an image that you've got off the internet and it's sort of not worked, and you're like, well, hold on, why is this like completely insane? It's probably because you've just traced it and it's got some perspective. And it's obviously every camera is going to be shot with a lens, so you're going to have those issues as well. So I'm not just going to create some bevels. So now I've just smoothed it, so I've got this shape here going around here. And I'm gonna try and smooth this out, make it look nicer. If I just select my edge, I'm just gonna extrude this all the way to the end, just so I can get an idea of what's going on. So everything's like super close, so I probably can, once I've got my shape, pretty happy with it. Maybe I want to, because my height difference here, probably going to actually then bring this down to match that distance. And I think I'm going to delete that. I am going to leave it as that. So now I need to, I'm going to select my outer edges. Well, just these edges. I'm going to do my first initial extrusion on the inside. So if I Control E. Now I've got this extrusion. I can start to see where I may need to add some more edges. So I'm just going to delete all that backsided faces. Well, they're not backside faces, they're faces that I don't need. And I'm just going to reverse my geometry. So now if I press 3, I need to add an edge loop here at least. So I'm actually just going to select that and add a bevel in there, because then that just adds an even amount of geometry, and we get that sort of, and you can view it as you create it, and we can see that we've sort of created the shape that we want. So I'm just going to level this out so it's nice and round. Sort of, because I don't really want to trace the reference. I want to make sure that my geometry is looking nice and clean. So at some point we will have to sort of abandon the reference, which I think we're sort of at that point. So yeah, we've got all our sort of holes and stuff, and all we need to do now is fill it up, and let's make sure that this is in the center, which it wasn't. Is this correct? This doesn't seem correct. Yep. Cool. So let's make sure that's... We may have to bring in another cylinder to double check that roundness. We'll definitely need to add an edge there anyway, so let's multi-cut that there. And here. So once we've joined that up, we'll figure out that roundness. Don't worry about that too much. Cool. So I'm actually going to start, because we've got loads of geometry here, but we can make disappear through edge loops. The one thing that we can't do is, we don't want it messy around here, so we can start to actually merge this together. So I'm just going to mesh, combine. And I'm going to start with this, I'm going to Control E, extrude that out one more time. And I'm going to start finding homes for my geometry. So let's go to target world. So we can add some more. So if we try to keep it without adding any extras in, it could start getting to look ugly, but we're lucky that in a way that is a hard surface model, so we can make it look as nice as possible. Cool. I'm just going to make sure that I rearrange all my geometry as I go along. Let's do that. So I'm just adding edges where I need to. So I could add 2 edges there, or I could add 1. What this will do is make us a loop. So we've got, it's quite close to the edge, but it should be okay. These edges and bridge. Yeah, so you've got this sort of edge loop here. We've got this pole here. This should be alright because we're quite far away from the edge. So I'm just going to go through, try and get all this nicely in place. So now we're coming up to this sort of cylinder, or this round part where we've actually got quite a few edges that we need to figure out where they're going to go. So simplest is straight up and here. So those. And we can squeeze one more up there. So we have to zoom in quite far for it to work. Oh. Cool, so we've got that. We're getting quite a lot of large stretch geometry, but it should be okay. Not doing anything too crazy. So bridge that. And let's see if we can rotate this all around. Cool. So probably bridge that. And now we're going to get to this point where we've got loads of geometry here, but not enough here. Extrude that out. Select those and match the center. And I think what I could do is just go target world and target world these together. Ooh. I'm just going to tidy this all up so it's nice topology. And find homes for these edges. So I'm just gonna Control E, extrude that down. Just going to scale that so that's nice and flat. Control E again to save time going in and out of it. Make sure that you do fix this if you've gone over. It's just can be easy to forget sometimes, and then you're wondering why things aren't working. Just make sure you weld everything. I think we start to make this look a little bit nicer. We're getting pretty close to finishing this bit now. We just need to make sure we get it all nice and symmetrical. So I don't really... We probably could have just made an edge loop going around there. So it shouldn't make any difference because our poles are not on the edges. That's why I always do the first extrusions, because these don't go on. I don't really like having them on sharp edges. It's just a personal preference thing. I think I don't want to risk any sort of pinching near the sharpness of edges. Cool, so I'm actually going to make another cylinder quickly. And just before I go any further with that, just check the roundness. I do this all the time, I'm just double checking all the roundness of my edges. And if we reduce that, I think that's 12. So if we bring this up to that. So I'm going to align that to there, and you can see this thing, it's not quite. In fact, before we do that, we will align it to this part here before we do anything. Cool. So now let's just line these up so it's nice and symmetrical. It's kind of what happens when you sort of, it's because I've just might have just accidentally tried to match it to the reference, and it's obviously just not. It's not. It's just the perspective's off on it. So now we've got all these edges here, and we need to make sure that we get all these to their nice little homes. So if we bring this one down here, that there, we can either redirect our topology, or add some more edge loops. Let's just add some more. We're going to need more here anyway, so just select our edges, make a bridge. See, we've redirected that. And we'll need more edges here. And what we can do is just Control G, and as we go through, I'm just gonna try and keep this as tidy as possible. And after we've done all this, we can just relax all the geometry afterwards as well. So if you're not doing it now, we can just use the sculpting tools to relax it. So bridge that. Bridge that. So I'm going to make sure that I extrude these out, and I'm going to make sure that these are nice and straight. I'm just going to work my way along to the bottom. Target about that. Now we're going to sort of start coming to an issue where we've got loads of edges here and not enough edges here, but this is something that we can work out easily. So I'm just going to add some edges here, so when I do extrude these, and what I'm going to do, I'm just going to make it easier, I'm just going to scale them down, just so now I can just go like that. And I'm just going to do multiple extrusions to the end, and now I can just go to my vertices and just do a mass target weld. So it just makes it a little bit easier sometimes, instead of having to do it one by one. As long as you make sure you do weld them afterwards, it's fine. You can do it any way you want. We can scale these so let's scale this flat, because they don't need to be at a funny angle. Let's Control E that. I think we need to add another multi-cut up here. Let's target weld that and target weld that. So I'm gonna just extrude this one more time, sorry, just so we're on an even sort of side. So we've got tops here, then we're gonna extrude out the top. And before I do that, I'm just gonna try and even out my topology. Cool. So I'll just select this edge, all these edges, just extrude those out. Just scale that so that's flat. So how many edges have we got? Let's figure this out. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So we've got the exact same amount. So that's absolutely great. So that worked out quite nicely. That's why it's always nice to sort of keep on top of how many edges you're sort of creating and what you're doing, because then you don't have to worry about sort of adding these sort of extra parts in. So we can actually just now go delete that. Select both our meshes, go mesh combine. Oh, we don't actually have 9. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So we actually have 1 extra on this side because we went all the way around. And that's fine, because actually I needed to do that on this one, because when I was doing this we ended up with some poles on the end here, which I don't like adding sharpness to, so I was actually going to extrude this out one more time so we didn't have that on the edge. So that's actually worked out nicely. I just need to figure out how I want to do that without breaking all the stuff. If I scale this Scale uniform. Oh, I've got something going on down here. There are probably some edges that I actually didn't. I remember those vertices that I may have not welded yet. I was waiting to the end. So just make sure you weld all your vertices. So now if I press R, it should all be. I'm just going to uniformly scale it. It doesn't matter if it's kind of becoming uneven here. We'll fix that. So I'm just going to Control E and extrude that out. Try and get that as close as I can to there. And hopefully, all I really need to do is just select all these edges and just snap to that. Then we can fix this curve. It's no big deal. Cool, so now we have the exact same amount. So let's make sure that's down there. And we can just bridge. Yeah, probably getting a bit insane with my count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay. Let's start the one. Might be getting just a little bit too tired. I don't know. My counting abilities is not showing through at the moment. I don't know what's going on. I count 9 each side, but it didn't match up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. I may have just imagined it. Cool. Yeah, I was just probably being a bit. So what I will do, I'll just add an edge loop in there, just because I don't like how there's a big gap. And when I smooth this, I will. Well, I won't smooth it. I'm just going to relax it, because I can just go through and just relax, or do it manually, or I can just delete all the history and center the pivot. Sculpting. Make sure you save it before you do anything, because you don't want it to crash. We haven't saved in a while. Cool, so I'm just going to go to my sculpting and just choose relax. I'm just going to go around. You know, I don't really need this reference anymore because we're so far from it. Well, we're not so far from it, we're just kind of not following it to the T. I'm just going to go around and relax on my geometry. You can sort of see here where it's not really relaxing is where we kind of need to move our edges, because it's not evenly spaced, so it kind of works on a basis of being evenly spaced. So let's try and get those nice and even. Same for down here. So it's my relax tool. If that's not working enough, you can use a smooth, or if you just double click on it, you can just turn up your strength like 200. But be careful you don't go too crazy because it could break something. I'm just going to go around and just smooth out some more topology. Cool. Obviously not that nice around here, but that should be absolutely fine. We're not doing anything too bad. Cool. So we've now done this. I'm going to select all my faces, and I'll probably guarantee that I've done something funny in some sort of way. So yeah, and let's make sure we just scale it so it's 100% flat. And this will probably help us with our deal with history, sculpting, relax. Let's just relax any sort of weird places. But that should be fine. Cool. So now I'm just going to press insert. Oh, W. Insert. Snap my pivot point to the bottom. Oh, I pressed delete by accident. Then I can Control D and just flip it in the Y. I forgot that we need to fix this here. So I actually forgot about that. Undo that. Where's our reference cylinder? Oh. That is in the center. How odd. Alright, let's Control D. This one. Just okay, let's just ignore that. We'll fix that. Let's hide that. Let's change our pivot point back up here. And we've got that nicely matched. So now we need to figure out what's going on here. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to roughly evenly offset them. Off my slit. So I'll select both my mesh now. And go mesh combine. I'm going to go to my vertices and I'm just going to go through and actually just merge to center all these. Just to make sure that they are all merged and they're all centered. Because we still need to go around and sort of double check that we've not lost any of our roundness. With just our reference. So if we press 3, that should all be working nicely. Cool. Let's bring back our reference cylinder. we're centered. Should be. Cool. What I'm going to do, I'm just going to go around and just double check all these edges. Even though we did check them before, I want to keep them evenly spaced. Probably something. It's possibly from where I may have accidentally selected the middle. It's not pushed them center, it's kind of stretched them, so that's why I've got to make sure that you always pick the X and Y when you're doing something like this. It's very easy to sort of pull it off, and it looks right in one view, but it's not right in the others. They're all looking pretty good on the outside. Hide that one. We should have an inside one. We can actually snap to this one, because I think we snapped to it before. It's very strange. May have accidentally moved. Probably why it's slightly off, because I think I may have accidentally moved it. It's another thing, you gotta be really careful that you don't move stuff stupidly, like I think I have done. So I'm just going to try and scale this down so it's matching the ones I've already snapped to. But this is the kind of things that you want to check when you're doing. If you're doing stuff which has got a lot of symmetry, it's really good to check that you're not breaking stuff as you're modeling it. Oh. It's always good to double check that if you're making something that's supposed to be round, it's always good to just double check that it's actually going to be round. So this might be a bit tedious, but it's worth it in the end, I think. Should probably put that on a layer so I stop selecting it. I think they're all pretty close anyway, so cool. So we can hide that. So now we can get rid of that as well. So we've got a pretty good shape here. It's all symmetrical. It's looking pretty good. So one more thing I'll do, I'll just relax I'm just going to go through and relax everything so it's got nice topology. Cool. So before I do any more, I don't want to sharpen on this edge, so I might add another safety sort of extrusion. This is not something I like at all, having edges on there. And we can go around, and I'm just gonna sort of just tidy these edges up so they're not just like kinked. It doesn't matter that they're like not going straight out with it, because it's just sometimes it's just like that. You can't get it perfectly aligned. Like if you want to spend hours and hours getting the correct amounts, correct angles and edges, you can, but I think as long as there's not any large kinks, it's fine. At the end of the day, it's just trying to, with hard surface, you just want to make it look pretty for your wireframe. Cool. So now if I press 3, turn off my X-ray, turn off my wireframe on shaded. I'm just going to go to my perspective. Don't need that for now. If I just assign my Fong, oh, have I got a default material on? So now, with my Fong selected, I can see that I haven't got any sort of mess on my mesh. It's looking kind of really nice and clean. No kinks. So now what I need to do is extrude this out. So if I bring back my reference, can you just pull this to the side now, and I can just look and see what I need. So if I select all my faces, Control E, you can see we've got one extrude. So if we actually start, because we're extruding this way, we'll start with the this thickness here. So we're going to have to do a lot of this by eye, but this is what you're going to train yourself for. So I think something like that. Maybe a bit less. Then the second extrusion is at least double that, I think. So maybe let's make it a little bit thicker. I think it's something like this at least. Cool. So we've done that, and we probably could have done this all in the before adding it all together, but I'm just gonna select all these edge loops. And I'd like to be able to see it. Before I do symmetry, so I'm just Control E. Let's just extrude that out. And I can sort of see how far it's going. It's not super far, it's just enough for a lip. So those ones are a lot longer, and these ones are not as quite as long. Control E. And then we can do the same for these inner sections. Cool. So now we've got pretty much our complete shape. You can see we've got some sort of, possibly some beveling on the inside there. Do we really want to do that? So what I could do is we could just try. So pull that. I would have to. In fact, I'm quite happy with how that is. We're not really going to see. Well, we can try it. Let's have a go. So it's kind of like, select that edge. Okay, so obviously, because we made it all nice and it selected the entire thing, so Not to complain about that, but yeah. Cool. So let's actually scale this. And now let's just select these edges. Pull them in like that. So now I've got a slight bevel on the edge on the inside. So now we just need to sharpen it all up. Let's actually make that a gradual bevel. Don't like how it suddenly pops out. Something strange going on here with my reflections. I don't know if that's just mine, but anyway. Cool. So we've done that. Now all we need to do is sharpen all our edges. So this has been pretty long, so let's try and get this finished up. So I'm just going to select all these inside areas where I don't have to worry about any other sections, so I'm just going to do the outside. Sometimes it does select the edge ring, which is quite annoying. So I'm just going to do these ones first, because if I do that as well, it's going to give me a slightly smaller average bevel. So I'm just selecting all these edge rings. You want to make sure that you do have them, just in case you've accidentally deselected them. Then I'm just going to select bevel. And where's my reference end? They're actually got a soft, they got like a hard bevel edge. So I'm actually going to have to bevel this twice. I don't think that, in fact, I'm going to have to deselect that. These ones, if I look at my reference, let's do the hard beveled edges first. Cool. So trying to do it all at once. Cool. So these are hard beveled edges, so I'm just going to bevel those. And I'm going to have to bevel them twice. So once you've beveled it once, you have to now bevel the beveled edges. Just so you get that nice hard edge look. And these have to be a really small amount. I'll probably add 3 segments. So now let's press 3. We can see we've got that really nice hard edge. I think we might have to add another edge loop in there because it's sort of rounding off, but it should be okay. Now let's add these bevels. These are slightly softer. Because you don't want to bevel if it's not beveled the same, you don't want to bevel everything the same, because that's when it looks a bit the difference between them makes such a difference. Cool. So there's a hard bevel. There's a hard bevel on that. It's pretty much a hard bevel on all these edges. So let's go around and hard bevel everything. That's not done. Let's just do all of it. This just takes a little bit of time, but it's worth it. So let's do these hard bevels. Quite a close edge loop, which is worrying, so we may have to sort of change that depending on how this bevels now. Okay, so we're gonna have to stretch these out. Sorry, that was probably my fault. Should have. I think we modeled it to. Let's put our default material on there. It's not difficult. All we have to do is just select all our edges. Probably gonna have to deselect some of them. Let's change it to component. So hopefully that should. You'll have to do this a different way. So I'm just gonna select all. Why is it? This is a much safer way to do it instead of accidentally adding overlapping UV. So I've selected all the insides, and I'm going to hold Shift and right click and use Transform Component. This is one of my favorite tools because it's kind of like extruding, but you're not. You want to push something in on its axis, but you can't quite use it because being somewhat extrudes does it in a different way. But this is really nice. It pushes it along the normal really well. So I'm just going to push it out slightly. Now I've got enough room. I probably should have done that at the start, but I think I modeled it to then it sort of model the bevel in. I think I thought about the bevel too early. Cool. So now we've selected all the edges, which bevel it. Now we've got plenty of room for that hard bevel. I think the other ones were 0.6. So 0.5. It's a bit smaller. I think that's 0.5 because it's relative to the actual scale. So now I'm just going to go around, select all those edges. And bevel that again. Nice tight bevel on it now. Let's go through and bevel all the insides, outsides. Probably could have broken this into multiple tutorials, but it's okay. It's just going to be one long one, and it's only taking a really long time because I'm talking through it at the same time and just kind of just going with it as I create it. Oh, we definitely want 3 segments. Let's put that back to 2. And we are probably... Oh, did we forget to... Nope, that bit doesn't have it, so... Let's do the same again. Hold Shift. Transform component. Oh, we may have to delete the history on this in a minute because it's getting quite heavy. So let's do that before it's too late and it crashes. So just delete all the history, freeze transformations. Just gonna double it, click on that edge. Let's do this hard bevel. And I'll do the same one here as well. Probably could have done that both at the same time. I don't know why I didn't. Anyway. Cool. So now if we press 3, turn default shading off. Because you've got those nice hard edges. It's looking pretty similar. We just now need to harden up these edges. I think these are all hard bevels around the edge. So if we just select this edge loop, luckily because we've modeled it in a way that we can just select an entire edge loop, it works out really well. So just go bevel again. And we're quite close to some other geometry here, so maybe just go to 6. If we double click those and do a hard bevel again. Got a nice sharp edge. Now we need to figure out how we're going to do this, because obviously we have this sort of bit in here, so we should just be able to do the same. If we do another hard bevel, not so much, so 0.6. And when we hard bevel that, we're obviously going to make just not keen on. Do you know what? I'm going to undo that. And I don't like that sort of, even though that's in there, I just don't like it. I prefer it nice hard edged. So I'm actually gonna undo that. And the best way for me to do this is, that's not changed. Right, so how am I going to undo this? So I'll look at it. I think maybe I looked into that too much and it's not actually a... it's not what I thought it was. So now we've ended up with, unfortunately, something we've got to fix. Which is fine because we can just Um, cool. So let's first of all select all our edges that we definitely moved. Ooh. I had a feeling that this probably wouldn't be. I wouldn't like it. And it's very easy to fix, so don't worry about that. Probably shouldn't have done it. So it's up to you if you want to leave that in. I'm taking it out because I just don't like it. And because we're making our own thing, we have the luxury of choice. So let's go to our front shading X-ray. Because we scaled it out, so what we need to do is just scale it back in. Cool. That's all matching nicely. The thing I want to do is fix that one vertex that we did move manually. I'm just going to select the surrounding edge loops. Go to my scale. Oh, come back. Reset this tool back to world. Ooh, don't want to do that. Yeah, just double check that it's flat. And I can just check my shading. That's alright, so it should be in. And I'm just checking against my highlights, and it's looking pretty good. So sorry about that. I just didn't really like it at all. So I'm just gonna hard bevel this because I just like the look of it, to be honest. Albeit we're not really gonna. It's gonna be one of those things where we spent a long time on it, but see, that's looking much better. Just hard beveled straight away. Maybe we should have done the back ones as well. Let's not worry about it. Cool. So I'm going to go to my orthographic front. I've noticed that there is some sort of weirdness going on up here. So I'm just going to sort of adjust this. So that's kind of right. I think that's where we snapped it to the cylinder. Obviously, I've tried to make it as clean as possible, but This should be good enough. Let's tell the wireframe was shaded off, sorry. And let's just... I think it's looking pretty good. I am very unsure if I want that. We're not going to see it. To be honest, I think that should be fine. So, we're pretty much done with this now. We can go around and just double check our topology, but it looks pretty good. We've got a nice hard bevel on the outside. Not too worried about these ones. We're not going to see it, but if you want to go around and hard bevel it all, it's fine. But yeah, we're pretty much done with this tutorial. So if you've enjoyed it, hit that like button and subscribe for more like this. And thanks for watching.